What is it like to be a child in India? For some, it is wonderful. For others, it is miserable, unacceptable. As a Dalit child, I remember sitting in a school and identified as a Dalit child, isolated, separated, asked to sit outside of the classroom because I was a Dalit. And I remember those days when I was lifting my hands up to ask a question to my upper caste teacher. He would not answer me, he would not look at me. Instead, he will just totally ignore me. That's the sad, bitter memories I have of a child myself being a Dalit in the schools. Dalit children in India are not educated for centuries, thanks to caste system which is playing havoc in the nation of India even today. In the year 2000, around 800 top Dalit leaders of our country came together with a plea: please educate our children.
Modern India is full of achievements, of which its government and people are justly proud. Shining India has been to the moon and is off to Mars. But there's another India, a sort of shadow side, largely unseen by the rest of the world, or indeed by many of India's wealthier 1.2 billion citizens. It's more than the familiar scenes of poverty. It's a world of darkness, where, in addition to extreme deprivation, lurks persecution and oppression on a huge scale. In this, the other India, far from the gaze of Western democracies, the Dalits, along with India's other destitute and oppressed peoples, all 300 million of them, struggle to survive. Condemned to poverty, starved of opportunity, harassed and subject to daily cruelty, this is the world of India's forgotten children.
There are these mindsets that if I bring a girl child into this world, I will have to look after her dowry. I will have to take care of her till she grows up and is married off. With this, of course, we have a lot of other issues where children are being married off very young ages. Over and above that, we have issues now of children and women being trafficked. Both of them are being trafficked for labor, sometimes for organ trade, but a large number of them are trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation. And it's very easy for people to blame the government, politicians, industrialists, whoever it may be, to say that, oh, you see, they were born in poor families, or they were born in so-and-so caste, or they're born in cities and towns and districts and states of India which is not so developed. If India can go and reach the moon, it doesn't want to reach its father of districts. How far could that be?
I live with my father and mother. There are two brothers and sisters living with me, and we live together in this home.
My family background is very poor. I have to work in this mill for earn something for our family.
Amit's father cannot work, so Amit, who is 14, has to provide for his family and has been working here in the rice mill since he was a small boy. India has laws against child labour, but they are largely ignored. Amit works 4 to 6 hours daily before and after school. He has no choice, as in bonded labour, he repays loans his parents have taken at extortionate rates of interest. Amit says he hates the fumes and dust, which choke his lungs and gives him chest pains. Long term, it may well destroy his health, but his family are very poor, and without adequate welfare, what can he do?
The reason we refer to forgotten children is mainly because India is a very young country. One of the statistics is that more than 75% of India's population is under the age of 35. But in this sheer numbers of young people, you have the children of the 250 million Dalits who are in that number. And then you have the children of the 500 million low caste who are within that number, which in fact means that the majority of youth in this country either are from the Dalit or from the low caste. And therefore, as India emerges, these children are forgotten. Forgotten in terms of access to quality education like everybody else who is privileged, English medium with the vernacular, access to health care, access to economic empowerment, access to protection against the laws. Their plight has been called by various commentators as nothing less than national shame.
There is a lot of structured violence that happens, a lot of exclusion and discrimination that girls face. Even violence, severe violence, physical violence, mental violence, restriction of freedom, a lack of choice in terms of marriage, profession, education, employment. In all spheres, there's a lot of denial of agency to the girl.
Poor parenting is, of course, a significant factor in a child's development and psychological health. On average, 8 children under 14 commit suicide every day. One such, who miraculously survived her own serious attempt to take her life, is Mariam. We have had to obscure her face, as recently there have been several attempts to kill her. Indeed, just the day before this interview, there was an attempt to abduct her from the hostel where she sought refuge. Mariam's mother was a bar dancer who routinely slept with her clients, and from when Mariam was only 4, regularly brought them back home to share the bed which she in turn shared with her daughter. This had always troubled Mariam, but particularly so when more recently one of the clients became more regular and sought to marry her mother. Sharing their bed, this man started to abuse the young Mariam. Distressed and confused by all this, Mariam attempted suicide by lying on the railway tracks. In the event, not being of great size, the oncoming train passed over her, but severed her lower leg in the process. Rescued by a passerby, she was taken to hospital, and despite profuse bleeding and devastating damage, her life was in fact saved. But there was worse to come.
On 5th October, that Isha, my friend, she called me up and she told me on 2nd October your mom committed a suicide. And why? Because Vijay, he left her. Then once my whole family member came to kill me. So I ran to police station, not ran actually, I took an auto and I ran over there. And I told the police station, in that police station, everything, what had happened. So they told, okay, we'll take a written note from your family members, they'll not come in your way anytime. So they took a note, and because I'm a minor, they put me to CWC, Child Welfare Community.
In my opinion, the oppression of women and children worldwide is the paramount moral challenge of the present era. India, with 1/3 of its population below the age of 18, it's also known as a young country. Sadly, India is also the home to the most number of child laborers. And also, it has the largest number of sexually abused children. Basically, I think this is because the children's voices can be easily silenced. Their nimble fingers can be forced to work from dusk to dawn for a pittance, and they are the invisibles. And they just disappear without even causing a ripple. And hence, they also become easy prey for the targeters. They are forced into sexual exploitation and bonded labor. We have over 50 billionaires in our country, and yet we have 17 million child laborers. India is also home to 3 million children living out there in the streets. In the face of such a grim picture, the only solution, I think, is education. Education is the answer. Whatever problem we are trying to address, be it healthcare, poverty, unemployment, or human rights, I think education is a part of the huge solution.
You have the issue of children who are being kidnapped, smuggled, sold into commercial sexual exploitation, free labor, and sometimes for organ trade. And that is human trafficking. And in this human trafficking, you look at the economics of it being so lucrative. When a child is stolen, a child is smuggled, a child is kidnapped, you can sell this child 12 to 14 times. And this commodity, this child or this woman, is a commodity that does not become simply second hand. It becomes 14th and 15th hand before this child or woman is sold into the small brothels and red light areas in our country. Children as young as 4, 5, 6 years old. Not only for commercial sexual exploitation in brothels, but also into massage parlors, into making various kinds of films. Blue film, green film, red film, grey films. You name the rainbow of films that are there. And all of it is money. It's no longer a social evil. And I abhor this phrase called social evil that most people seem to be using it. Because as long as they say it is a social evil, the politics and the economics of it is kept outside. It is a political and economical crime.
To be trafficked as a child is not only devastating, the damage, like a flood, inevitably tears into adult life. So what are the long-term implications for a child trafficked in this way to grow up with a life of continuing exploitation and abuse? Well, this is Nayati's story. In her own words, Nayati gives us a whole life picture of an abused child become an abused woman. India has many forms of trafficking. This is a story of what happens to a child in a whole life of forced prostitution.
My name is Nayati. When I was 9 years old, I was dedicated to the goddess, and as a jogini, it meant I was owned by the men of the village. I would no longer belong to my parents. Anybody could sleep with me and do what they wished with me, which is what happened and still happens to this day. When I was 14, the man who was responsible for me becoming a jogini claimed his right to marry me. He already had 2 sons and was rich and owns land. But all he wanted of me was to be a slave to him and his family. Apart from abusing and demeaning me, still as a jogini, anyone could sleep with me. I was a sex slave as well as a house slave. So over time, I had 12 children. I have no idea who their fathers are, but from various diseases, 7 of my children have died. Of the 5 who remain, 2 of them, a girl and a boy, are blind. 1 girl is paralyzed, and it is just the 2 boys who are working, laboring and driving an auto rickshaw. They are very poor, as I am. My husband never helps them out. Neither has he ever given any money to me. He could do easily, but he always refused to pay for anything, including medicine, which is how my 7 children died. Yet, despite his wealth, I still have to pay for food for him and his children. And to do that, I have to work as a coolie, as a laborer too. I am lucky if I get 40 rupees a day. I feel strongly that no one should become a jogini, not in our world today. It's a life of exploitation, poverty, and sheer misery. But there's still so much superstition around, and many young girls are still being dedicated. There's been a government law since 1988 designed to prevent this happening, but not one case has been brought under it. And still it goes on and on. The government says there are hardly any joginis left, but there's been a survey recently that shows there are 2,200,000 in Andhra Pradesh alone. It's a terrible life. I can't describe how bad it is. I want to tell our government to stop it altogether, but they've not done anything yet. I'll be surprised if they do.
Child labor is again a heinous crime which is very unique to our country, I would say. Then thanks again to caste system, which says that because you are Dalit, you are doomed to only do certain jobs. For instance, manual scavenging. It breaks my heart as I see on a daily basis in the streets of India today, where a particular group of people called manual scavengers are involved in cleaning the human excrement in their bare hands. And I cannot think of any other profession in the entire globe which is so demeaning as this. And I have declared war against this crime. And I want to fight out for these children who are so-called manual scavengers, who are involved, instead of going to schools, they are involved in cleaning the toilets. They are involved in sweeping the roads. And this breaks my heart. And this is India for you.
नाम रेखा 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 आप ये काम कितना साल से कर रहे हैं
5-6 वर्ष से बेसी हो गया
कितने घर में आप काम करते हैं
30 घर
कितने घर में
30
कैसा लगता है काम करने से
अब कैसा न लागे लेकिन पेट भरे खातिर करते हैं आदमी
कैसा न लागेला कैसा लगा फिर बोलो खराब लगेला अच्छा लगा
अब खराब तो लगते बा लेकिन फिर भी करही के पड़ता है इंसान के मजबूरी ऐसा चीज होला
The employment of manual scavengers was banned in 1993, but many homes, local authorities and the Indian Railway continue this disgusting and health-harming practice. Manual scavenging is so life-threatening, scavengers rarely live beyond 30 years. Even though, as we've seen, scavengers now cover the human feces and the rags used for menstruation with ash, the health risks are as great as they ever were. It's a problem of caste. If you're born into a scavenging family, for the majority, there's no way out.
This is not the India which the world is known, because they think India is shining. They are talking about economically booming India, the IT exploding India. But I'm talking about another India, a different India, which is not known hitherto to the outside world. And there you see the streets of India, you will see what caste system has done to this country. You will see what happened to these children who could have been studying in schools, but their childhood is snatched away. Their dignity is stolen. And it broke my heart the other day as I was reading a statistic which says that there are 200,000 child prostitutes just in the city of Mumbai, red light district. That breaks my heart. And I was reading another statistics, I almost cried when I read, it says by 2025, by the year 2025, 1 out of 5 Dalit children will be a child prostitute. And I cannot digest this fact.
Most people see India as a very prosperous country, a country that's developing and proposed to be the next superpower in the world today. Very few people know that today in India we have more starving children than there are in sub-Saharan Africa. Children starving because of chronic malnutrition, chronic energy deficit, because they don't have access to food. Often when there is food available elsewhere in the country and it's just not distributed equally. This unequal system in our country is what predisposes the Dalit people and the Dalit children to a whole battery of illnesses that are largely preventable, and basic primary health care can protect them.
Caste system was introduced to us by a group called Aryans who invaded India 3,000 years ago. And they are the one who introduced the caste system to this country, and it exists till date. And it says because you are born in a particular caste, you are an untouchable. You are an unborn, and it is better that you are not born.
They are the most vulnerable children, the Dalits. They mostly come from dysfunctional families. They're looking for opportunities to get away because of the poverty that they live in, because they are abused. And I think the Dalit children are always looking for opportunities to better their lives because they are always segregated, always oppressed. Any chance they get and any small promise that's made for a better life, they just go for it. And so they are totally unaware when false promises are made to them. So they are easy targets for the traffickers.
We really believe that the stakeholders of trafficking are multiple, that There are many layers, and it's a very well organized industry and not something ad hoc. When you identify the pathways that are happening in the country, you realize that it is businessmen who have contacts within the government, contacts at high levels, influential people who are involved as well, because it's such a lucrative business. As India's economy is doing better and as our middle class buying capacity is doing better, so is the demand for sex work and sex workers. And because of that, there's a driving force that drives women and victims from the villages, from the rural areas, who are uneducated, who don't even know there's an issue called trafficking until they themselves find themselves entangled in the system.
The biggest thing that needs to change is the way young men in this country are reared. I think girls have always been disciplined and taught. I work in full-time in an organization that works on the empowerment of women. And this organization has existed for over 20 years. I joined about a year ago. But now my team and I have agreed for the next few years to focus on the gender sensitization of men and boys. And so what we need to see changed is the attitude of men and boys towards girls.
Here at Tarika Center, we've seen lives being changed because of the help that we are rendering to women and children. We just go whenever we get news of someone being trafficked or someone being exploited. We work together as a team. We have them rescued. We are privileged to have them over at our center for the rehabilitation part of it. We have vocational training skills being offered to women. We teach them tailoring, computers, spoken English. We also run a beautician's course for them. These are women who come from vulnerable backgrounds and they have been exploited and abused. But even as they come here and gain a skill, they go out with such confidence and then they begin to lead productive lives. Their lives are totally transformed. We also have accommodation for women and children who are fleeing life-threatening situations. And for them, we also give them skills. And for the children, we send them to schools. Some of our children go to the Good Shepherd schools. They excel when they are given an opportunity. They study in the English medium schools, and that just turns their lives around. And we are absolutely thrilled to see the difference that it's making in their lives.
Of the women we've seen in the Tarika Center, some have been literally rescued from the exploitation and oppression that comes from human trafficking. No official figures exist, but it is estimated that trafficking affects up to 65 million Indians. Forced labour is the largest problem. India's poorest are highly vulnerable to exploitation by loan sharks. And as we've seen, for this they pay dearly in bonded labour, in rice mills, quarries, agriculture, sweatshops, and the like. But lagging only a few steps behind is India's sex trade, which is booming. An astonishing 40% of all prostitutes in India are children. And though there is a growing demand for young girls in the industry, increasingly in centres like Mumbai, young boys are being recruited to work as so-called masseurs, a euphemism for male prostitution. What can protect young people from this terrible, life-destroying criminal exploitation? And for Dalit children, clearly the most vulnerable, is there any way of helping them transcend the age-old stranglehold of caste and untouchability? From the Dalit community has come the recognition that short of abolishing caste itself, almost an impossible dream, education is the true key, a way to unlock the oppression of the centuries and to free potentially millions from the dark side of the other shameful India.
Most of the children coming to our schools are from Dalit Bahujan community, that is backward and outcast children group, and these comprise of 80% of the population. Their job depends on the English medium education. So people request us to come to the villages and the neglected places where we can for those children. We have over 24,000 students in our schools, and 80% of the children are coming from this community. Many of their parents have no job or smaller jobs, and they cannot afford for English medium education. Because the children are going to the school, many are not being taken away to the cities for other small menial jobs, and they get vanished. They are not anymore traced. So Our schools are giving not only education, primary medical attention and economic development, and prevent the children being trafficked to the other cities.
The Dalits themselves believe if they want to break caste in the minds of the Dalit people, and the place to begin it is with children who grow up thinking that they are not less than anybody and they are not untouchables. They are equal in value like anybody else, and are provided not just a secular curriculum of English education with a government certificate, but their thinking pattern of how they think themselves and the dignity that they have and the self-worth that they have is very critical. And so the education model that they have wanted, centers and schools that affirms this. Now, education for our children and for the early children is really prevention from trafficking. If we don't do that, most of them are in for a life of being trafficked and in some kind of exploitative labor. Close to 50% or more of all our children would have ended up as child laborers or as trafficked children or sold into the vast slave human market that's in India if they had not come into this kind of English medium education. We have now graduated 4 years of students across the nation, and we see the impact of that education on these kids. Earlier they had no dreams, today they have dreams. Earlier they had no hope, today they have a lot of hope. Earlier they wouldn't be able to compete, today they can compete with the best in the land and they don't need any favors from the government. So we are seeing the stark difference. We are also seeing the difference in their communities and in their families, in their villages, where suddenly education center becomes an enormous symbol of the empowerment of the whole community.
I want to become a doctor and help to the people just like me. Many of the people are in problems like me, how I am in my childhood. Like in my childhood, my father left us. So many of the people are like that. So I just want to help them.
I want to become a cricket player and I will get a chance. I'm trying in the selections. I got many medals and scholarships.
After this, I finished school. I want to join one college, Ela College. I want to become a police.
I want to become a doctor because in our country there are a lot of sick people. There is not much doctors to treat them.
For Dalit children, it's almost impossible to exaggerate the transformatory power of education. For children who have grown up in extreme poverty, with notions that they are untouchable, without value, that they can be disposed of by any who take exception to them, English medium education in these Good Shepherd schools means the world to them. Thanks to this initiative, despite ongoing caste prejudice, the young people we have just heard can, and most likely will, make the kind of progress they aspire to. A generation ago, it would have been impossible. Today, from the schools we have seen in this film, young people are in fact going on to higher education, and some have already become doctors, teachers, sportsmen and women, police and army personnel, and other roles hitherto denied them. And education is the key.
I strongly feel there is hope for the children of India. And I say it because I see already people have taken notice of this heinous crime which is being committed against the children in India. Child prostitutes, child laborers, manual scavengers, and there is a growing awareness. Had you asked this question, say 5 years ago, I would have said there is no hope for Dalit children. But today there is a growing awareness. Thank God for even the projects like the Forgotten Children of India, which exposes the other side of India, which tells the world that there are a group of children who needs to be loved, who needs to be cared for. who needs to be educated, who needs to be told that they have a worth, self-worth, self-dignity. And hence, I am hopeful that things will change in our country.